and welcome to Training Tuesday, where we go through weekly tips and tricks to make your career just a little bit more awesome. This week, we are digging into the topic of burnout and how to actually identify that you're heading that direction before you actually get there. And this is something that is really on my mind right now because I am at the start of my crazy summer of fun. This happens to me every summer, and I've noticed this about myself. Every summer I make plans, we have trips, we have people coming to town to visit us, and somehow when June hits, I look at my calendar and I say, okay, cool. So I'm about to embark on this journey and I have something every single weekend for the next 2 or 3 months. That's kind of where I'm at now. So see you guys in September if anyone wants to hang out. But truth is, right, like as much as I enjoy that thing and as much as I enjoy all the time I get to spend with people who are coming to visit because Colorado's beautiful in the summer, as much as I enjoy the trips that I get to take, it can also be a little exhausting. And so one thing I've learned for myself is I really have to have time to recoup, to allow myself to collect myself because it's probably not going to be on the weekends. It is some serious weekend warrioring going on. And so with that all in mind, I wanted to talk about this topic today because burnout is a challenge for so many people, so many women especially. I actually gave a talk about a month ago at the Sheer Impact Conference, and we talked all about this topic of burnout in women. And there have been studies. There was a study by the University of Montreal that talked all about some of the reasons why people think that burnout impacts women at a higher rate. And there were a few things, some of the systemic issues, such as not being promoted to positions where they can impact that change, some of these things, right? There were a lot of different contributing factors to it, but one of the really interesting ones, and what I kind of wanted to flag today, is this tendency for a lot of people, but for a lot of women especially, to power through the pain and pretend that it's not a problem and keep going until it's too late. And this is something that I see all the time, right? You see people approaching burnout, starting to work really hard, starting to get exhausted, and unfortunately they try and ignore this issue or pretend that it's not really an issue until it's too late, until they get to the point of total exhaustion and they end up throwing up the towel and saying, okay, well, I'm so exhausted, my only option seems to be to just leave and go, do something else for a couple months while I recollect myself and get my energy back because I'm so drained. That is not what we want. That is far from ideal. And so what I really wanted to do for you this week is start to bring that to your attention, to flag this idea that you don't have to wait until burnout is insurmountable or feels overwhelming to address it. We want to start to address this earlier on because the truth is, right, you need to get to the place where you can course correct before you reach throw my hands in the air and I'm done with this kind of burnout. And the best way to do that is to identify that gap as it's happening, is to start to realize, to start to be more mindful of the situation and to start to know, hey, I'm bordering on pretty exhausted. Maybe I should try and see what I can shift right now instead of just saying I can take on 10 first priorities and do them all. Because as we know, not how math works, friends. So my tips for you this week, I have 2. My first tip for you is I want you to start to check in with yourself regularly. So whether that's putting a recurring calendar invite on your calendar, whether that's setting a little date for yourself to go to your favorite coffee shop once a month and sit down and think about really truly how your time is being spent and if that's how you want it to be spent. Right? So you can always use the Wheel of Life exercise, which is one we've talked about before. If you have questions, you can chat me about it. But you can always use a Wheel of Life exercise. You can journal on it. But I want you to have at least once a month some time for reflection to ask, how am I actually doing in terms of where I'm spending my effort? Is it where I want to be spending my effort and my focus? Right? So I want you to, 1, set some time with yourself regularly to check in on this. And then part 2 of that conversation is to start talking about how you're really feeling with people early and often. Because not only do we want you to start to identify when you're starting to approach burnout before you actually reach the explosion point, but we want you to be able to have a conversation with people. Because unfortunately, with so many women, I see this focus on being strong, with being resilient, with knowing that we can power through. And sure, you could, but at what cost, right? At what exhaustion? At what that doesn't make you any weaker of a person to realize you need a break sometimes. It makes you human. And so I really encourage you to start having these conversations with someone. Find someone who you feel comfortable talking to this about, but start to have a conversation about how you're really doing instead of without thinking answering, oh yeah, I'm fine, everything's fine, just busy, because that's not a great answer, okay? So I really want you to think about those things this week. I want you to, one, start actually checking in with yourself on how you're doing before you reach the end all be all. And then two, I want you to actually start trying to have conversations with at least one person who you feel comfortable discussing this with, okay? Because if you start to do those two things, you're going to feel a world of change. So I would love if you tell me below if you've ever felt this kind of burnout. I know I certainly have. I think it's a really humanizing thing, and I think it can be helpful to remember that so many people have felt it. So tell us below if you've been guilty of this too, or just give me a like if this resonates with you. And I want you guys to know that you're not alone, and we want to start to address this before it's a bigger issue. So start having these conversations, start acknowledging where you're at, start accepting that the fact that you don't have to do it all, and begin with those exercises. And in the meantime, happy working.